Eons ago, I made a video where I compared Halo to Half-Life 2. Although there was no real comparison there, I just trashed Halo. I praised no aspect of a game that obviously has a lot of really exceptional elements to it. So why would I pretend that Halo is just a huge dumpster fire?
I learned it by watching you!
I just acted like it was garbage from top to bottom because I hadn't really figured out what sort of videos I wanted to make, and thought the only way to be entertaining on YouTube was to trash games. I almost don't want to say anything positive about Halo now, though. I mean, doing so would feel weak. The comments I got on that video hurt my fragile gamer feelings. I mean, really, fuck those guys.
How dare you?
The idea of one of them stumbling across a video where I say, you know, this Halo stuff's actually pretty good, makes my skin crawl.
If they came to hear me beg, they will be disappointed. Are you sure?
You could make a religion out of this.
But yeah, this Halo stuff is pretty good. The thing is, as I played Halo 2, 3, and Reach, I saw the problem that Halo fans just don't acknowledge. I did enjoy these games, but there were a few asterisks attached to that enjoyment. I've been watching Halo fans from a distance the past few months, which has been an odd experience. They're currently obsessed with this strange monkey man, and alright, I'll admit it, I really love him too.
You're my baby and I love you so much! Oh, God!
But putting the strange simian fetishization aside, it seems to me that Halo's community wants a return to the old gameplay that made Halo the juggernaut it was. And, well, I got some news for you. What made Halo the worldwide success it was back then is what's killing it now.
Trust me.
I will live in thy heart, die in thy lap, and be buried in thy eyes. Benedict, from Much Ado About Nothing. What meaning do you get from this line? Romance, I guess? It is, however, actually filthy as fuck because Shakespeare was a sensual dog. Die was actually slang for an orgasm back when this play was written. It makes sense, I guess. Having an orgasm was punishable by death in the 1500s. Even the title of the play itself, Much Ado About Nothing, is a double entendre. Nothing was actually slang for a woman's nether regions back then. So really, the line's meaning has been lost. Sure, you could update it. I will live in thy heart, bust a nut in yo snatch, and be buried in thy eyes. Benedict, from Much Ado About Pussy. But the double entendres have been destroyed. You can explain what it means, like I just did, but that also destroys the joke because I had to explain it. Time's relentless march forward has destroyed this line. It can no longer be enjoyed like it was by original audiences. Time changes art, usually for the worse. What makes something great one day makes it inscrutable the next. Time turns strengths into weaknesses. I'm American, so I don't know if this is the universal high school English experience, but whenever we would stop shooting each other to discuss classic literature, we'd have to talk about history as well. The sensibilities of audiences at the time of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, explanations of who the oracles were in Oedipus. We even had to read a translated version of Beowulf because English had changed so much that the original was written in what seems to be fucking Elvish. I love To Kill a Mockingbird, but in 500 years after the liberal elites have had their way, and we're all just various shades of brown, it'll have to be explained to a brand new, cuck soy boy audience. It'll serve as not entertainment, but a history lesson. Obviously, games are particularly vulnerable to the passage of time, not just graphically, but from a design perspective. In the original Doom, you moved with arrow keys.
Horror.
The more innovative your game is, the more likely it is that you're going to end up making some mistakes that result in your game aging about as well as any celebrity's tweet before 2010.
So you have chosen death.
The Halo franchise is a unique case. There's no aspect of these games' designs that is objectively horrifying like moving with arrow keys, but they're undoubtedly games of their time. There's a reason this franchise has faded from relevance, and despite what many Halo fans will attest, this reason isn't that 343 changed Master Chief's design from that of a big green brick to a dude in black tights with green plastic taped to him. The problem is simple, and it's a problem caused by the time in which Halo was created. It's slow. You move slow, your shield recharge is slow, the enemies are slow. I mean, why would you make a shooter that's slow? That's like making a sex doll that comes with an irremovable chastity belt. That's poor design. Bad. Bad games. 0 out of 10. Or is it? Halo was designed for the original Xbox. It was designed for a console at a time when shooters on console had never achieved the same level of success as they had on PC. Why? Aiming with a controller sucks. You may think it doesn't, and that's because the game aims for you. Soft auto-aim is now so ubiquitous that many don't even realize it exists. Halo also standardized console controls. Grenades were mapped to a single button. You could only carry 2 weapons at once so that you could switch between them with a single button press as well. And the game used the left stick for movement and the right stick for aiming. Twin-stick aiming did exist before its release, but wasn't the standard. The standard was aiming with a D-pad. But despite the controls that helped console players enjoy the same massacre that PC players had been indulging in for nearly a decade, more still had to be done. PC shooters were about speed. They were about rolling around at the speed of sound and shooting in every direction, constantly whipping the mouse around in a way that couldn't be done by those that both lacked experience in shooters and were working with a much less precise input method. Changing the controls wasn't enough. Everything had to be changed in order to make shooters feel at home on a console. Halo needed slow movement speed. This slow movement speed resulted in a regenerating shield on top of a standard health system because it was difficult to avoid projectiles when you could barely move. Enemies had to be changed as well. They couldn't surround you and force you to aim in many different directions. PC shooters fired enemies at you from a giant cannon and would often surprise you with them in the form of bullshit monster closets that can get fucked. But Halo would almost always let you know exactly where they would be before you fought them. The enemies also almost always would stay in front of you, never surprising you from behind. They'd use cover intended to move away from the player as opposed to towards them, except for those elites with energy swords that can also get fucked. Grenades were made integral to the core combat loop due to their AoE damage not requiring particularly great aim, and you had a big floaty jump so that you could still avoid projectiles while still not moving faster than a snail on Ambien. Every aspect of Halo was expertly crafted for a console shooter in 2001. The concessions that Bungie made for an audience unfamiliar with shooters resulted in a completely different type of shooter altogether. A shooter that was deliberate. One not just about moving quickly and putting down enemies quickly, but one that prioritized controlling the battlefield through positioning and liberal usage of grenades. One that forced you to decide ahead of time which weapons to bring with you. I know it's probably been irritating that I've been speaking about each Halo's combat interchangeably, but, well, that's only because
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. There are at least 7.
there's very little evolution between each Bungie Halo game, except for Reach, which I'll discuss later. They're all slow, they're all deliberate, they're all dated by the time in which they were created. I think what struck me as I played through them all is that there's really no other combat like it. The unique design challenges that Halo had to overcome created a unique combat system. Despite my obvious love affair with fast-paced old-school shooters, which is frankly getting embarrassing because John Carmack recently filed for a restraining order, I do like this combat. But the slow pacing does drag it down for me, and I think it's the reason Halo's popularity has been waning over the years. Console players got to grips with shooters. They can aim now. They don't need something slow in order to play them. Shooters have returned to their natural run-and-gun state this past decade. Halo was a worldwide phenomenon when it was slow. That's what made it what it was. This combat is no longer a feature, it's a hindrance, but a hindrance that gives Halo a unique identity. It's simultaneously both great and outdated. The sandbox of vehicles, using grenades to control the battlefield, the unique tactics that each enemy brings to the game. There are objectively great things here, but too much of my time in these games is spent hiding behind a rock or slowly walking to the next combat encounter. So what, make it faster, have the shield recharge quicker and add sprinting and dashes and all that shit?
No.
Just doing what's popular gets you Rage 2 or Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. No one wants that shit.
Ew! Get off of me! Ugh, as if!
Like I said, what kept me playing Halo was the fact that there's nothing quite like it. Some of you watching may have been thinking about the Flood when I talked about enemies being more tactical and the gameplay as a whole being slower. And yeah, when the Flood shows up, the pace of the combat does increase. And I hate it. The gameplay turns from interesting but slow to just doom but worse. Let's go back to that quote from Much Ado About Nothing. It isn't funny on its own, but it also isn't funny by just throwing in modern terms. Changing the words doesn't magically fix the line. Adding in sprint or faster shield recharges or faster enemies won't fix Halo. Halo doesn't need to be just like every other shooter, it needs to be properly translated for a modern audience, while not losing what sets it apart. Bungie's last Halo game was Reach, and while the combat didn't change much from game to game, Reach shows the minor evolution that took place over the franchise. You can sprint, for example, although they should have just made the default movement speed faster. Projectiles are also faster, and you can't carry as many grenades. So Reach should be my favorite, right? I mean, it's faster.
Are you stupid or what? Did you hear what I said?
It felt like what was added to the combat was there, not because it was an actual evolution of the formula, but more so because it made it more like another game franchise. You know the one that cast Halo down from its ivory tower, stole its crown, kicked its dog, and fucked its wife. Halo sat around blowing raspberries on the side of the road while shooters continued to evolve around it, until they suddenly looked up and saw that Halo was beginning to feel downright old.
Get in, loser, we're going shopping.
Bungie then seemed to come to the simple and elegant solution of just doing what other shooters were doing, even if what they were doing sort of fucked with Halo's core identity. All the other Bungie Halo games I played had a strong sense of identity to them, but Reach just sort of feels like Call of Duty but slower. And shit, I already don't like Call of Duty. The only positive thing I have to say about Call of Duty is that it's so fast-paced, you don't even have time to think about how little fun you're having. Reach seemed to be the beginning of Halo sacrificing what made it special in order to remain relevant. But I can't confirm that. Alright, so this was the part where I was going to talk about 343's treatment of Halo following Bungie's departure. But I haven't played Halo 4, nor 5, because I ain't buying an Xbox One. You hear me, Phil Spencer? I'm not buying that bullshit. You think your wearing of gamer t-shirts under your various jackets will fool me? You're not a gamer. Real gamers wear SS uniforms covered in Cheeto stains and some cargo shorts. I bet Phil Spencer doesn't even hate minorities. Shame on you, Phil. So I'm not going to talk in detail about what 343 did to Halo, but, well, just looking at it, yeah, this doesn't bear much resemblance to what I've been playing the past few weeks. It looks fast, though. I'm sure Halo fans wanted that. Oh no, they hated it. It probably wasn't that bad. A review bomb fueled by gamer rage can level a city, and as I've discussed before, is often unwarranted. But Halo 5 definitely does not resemble the Halo I've been playing. The Halo games that dominated the conversation and sales charts of the early to mid-2000s. Reach feels weird. It's like a sort of Franken-Halo. It's out of place, and 343, it seems, continued where Bungie left off by chasing trends even further, which is the end of just about any franchise. The second the boss rolls in and says, alright, sales are waning, just do what's popular. Well, that's the end. A similar thing happened to Doom. Doom 3 came out 10 years after Doom 2, and shooters had changed dramatically. Running around while getting mobbed by 100 enemies was out. Slowly walking down hallways was in. Having almost zero story was out. Having a whole assload of story was in. Action was out, atmosphere was in. Having a sprint button was in. What was in wasn't Doom. Doom 3 isn't a bad game. It's pretty good. I just preferred it when it was called Fear. It just took a lot of influences from popular games at the time, and somewhere along the way, stopped feeling like Doom. And that's why Doom died, kids. That's why people only talk about it now as a history lesson. Wait, what's that sound?
I am not the villain in this story.
Doom 4 doesn't feel old, yet it still feels like Doom. How did id Software accomplish this? It seems to me that they took a close look at not just the mechanics of the original games, but the feeling those mechanics were trying to impart to the player. How Doom actually played wasn't important. Not being able to jump and moving with the arrow keys wasn't key to the Doom experience. Doom 4 had fast movement and no reloading so the game could maintain a relentless pace. It added in not just jumping, but double jumping so that you could move quickly in 3 dimensions. Doom 4 had enemies that mobbed you from a million directions at once, while adding glory kills that dropped health in order to encourage playing up close. Doom 4 got rid of the old, that had aged poorly, kept the old that made it special, and threw in new mechanics that actually improved the old ones. Segue. I love Terminator. The hair, the clothes, the phone book, the Walkman, the tech noir nightclub, the soundtrack, it is so goddamn 80s. I don't know what audiences felt like watching Terminator back in 1985, but I imagine it wasn't particularly stylized. But time gave Terminator a style and feel that improves it, in my opinion. Even the poorly aged special effects add a certain charm to the movie. There are a lot of flaws with the recent Terminator movies, but one that really bugs me is there's no atmosphere or identity to them. They're just slick, modern CGI headaches. Sometimes the passage of time doesn't make something worse. Sometimes it adds a sense of identity. There's a lot of potential in Halo's combat, and it really does stand out in modern times. But far too much of my time in these games was spent hiding behind a rock for like 80 years in order to replenish my shield. The pacing of Halo's combat no longer makes sense. It was the reason for its success, and is now the reason for its irrelevance. Halo needs to be faster, but making it faster would also destroy the fun that's here in the first place. Why use grenades in vehicles when I can dash across the map and wreck you with a shotgun? Positioning also doesn't matter that much when you can change position almost instantly. It's easy, relatively speaking, to slap a new coat of paint on a game for modern audiences. The problem is with games that were made in an entirely different landscape. Games that are so old that their core design needs a facelift. You need to double down on what made your games good, while translating them for a modern audience, all while not losing your identity. And that is nearly impossible.
Hard to believe he's dead. Were it so easy.
I will be watching Halo Infinite's launch with great interest. Can Halo's gameplay be translated while still maintaining what made it good in the first place? Obviously, a game is more than its mechanics, and Halo's presentation is great, but lots of games have great music or art design or both. What Halo brings to the table is its unique combat mechanics. That's what sets it apart. So, what can be gleaned from Infinite's gameplay reveal? I mean, all gameplay reveals, despite what they may say, are filled with smoke and mirrors bullshit. But what's on display here? It's got a grappling hook, which should double down on that verticality that the floaty jumps just barely touched on in the original games. And sprinting. That grappling hook should open up interesting new ways to position yourself, but positioning in Infinite doesn't seem to be as important as it was in the original games. The guy playing the demo is just standing in the middle of a group of enemies while getting shot in the face. His shield also recharges instantly when he stops getting shot. Once again, smoke and mirrors. I've been playing Halo at the heroic difficulty setting, which is apparently the difficulty that Bungie designed for, but this guy could be playing at the equivalent of can I play daddy difficulty. I'm only as good as the information I've been given, but what I've been given here only has the appearance of Halo. The enemy variety is there, but they all seem to be standing around waiting to be ran up to and destroyed. Some are aggressive though, which looks fun. Some enemies in the older Halo games would rush you as well. But the guys not rushing are just standing there, menacingly. Also, who is this grunt shooting at? Like, I'm seriously asking. It's sort of bothering me. What set Halo apart was how its slow pacing, while frustrating, resulted in every decision you make being important. Every enemy and their position was something that had to be carefully considered. Losing all your shields was a serious problem because you had to stop, while the enemies wouldn't. What makes Halo both interesting and bullshit is hiding behind a rock and moving slowly. Shooters nowadays incentivize aggression. You win by being too angry to die. Far Cry used to kill you nearly immediately if you were spotted, but now has you throwing shovels into cultist faces to win. Halo Infinite seems to be doing the same. The Chief is no longer cowering behind rocks. He's now jumping directly into enemies and administering aggressive extraterrestrial rhinoplasty at all times. Which I like, obviously, but it sure doesn't seem like the Halo I've been playing the past few weeks. Halo's identity is rooted in its origins, and its origins resulted in an identity that runs completely opposite with what modern gamers want from a shooter. I don't think it can be translated in a meaningful way without completely destroying what it was. To make these games modern and slick and fast, You'd be removing what made the originals both wildly successful and unique. You can add modern controls to an old game and almost always keep what made it special, but moving with arrow keys was a mistake. Halo's gameplay was masterfully crafted for an audience that needed it. It wasn't a mistake. Microsoft centering the entire Xbox brand on a franchise with a shelf life was a mistake. Will Halo Infinite be fun? Probably, yeah, I mean, it sounds amazing. It has a cool grappling hook, and it has Craig. I mean, come on. But will it be Halo? It seems to me that the answer is no. The world left Halo behind. It was built with an expiration date, and that date passed a decade ago.
Who you are? Breathe. No! You don't get to tell me what to do. You don't get to tell me anything!
I anticipate some angry comments on this video. Some of them probably revolving around the fact that I didn't discuss armor abilities or the magically disappearing and reappearing health bar, and I invite them. I mean, I get it. It must suck to grow up with a franchise with such a unique identity only for what made it special to later make it irrelevant in a changing world. I imagine that sort of thing leaves a really sour taste in your mouth. But at the end of the day, how lucky you are to have had something that makes saying goodbye so hard.